This is KSL Sunday Edition with Boyd Matheson.
Welcome to Sunday Edition. I am Boyd Matheson. Each Sunday, we attempt to divide the rage from the reason, elevate the conversation, connect the dots, and make the news make sense. We have conversations with great thinkers, great leaders, and great people making a difference. We talk politics so we can discuss society, and we explore society so we can discuss principles and the people in America who actually live them. We bring the best and brightest to Utah, and we send the Utah model to our nation's capital and beyond. Well, with the 2024 presidential election cycle in full swing, we are days away from Super Tuesday. Utahns will weigh in on caucus night, March the 5th, and cast votes in a presidential preference poll. One candidate vying for the Republican nomination is former United States Ambassador to the UN and former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley. Ambassador Haley has been crisscrossing the country in the run-up to Super Tuesday and is here in the Beehive State to share her vision and values, principles and policies with voters here in the state of Utah. And Ambassador Haley, welcome to Sunday Edition.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here in Utah.
It's great to have you in the state, and busy week for you leading up to Super Tuesday, of course. And as we say, we always get to the principles on this show. And so I want to start with your campaign and what is the animating principle that drives you in all of this?
You know, it's really about our kids. It's about people's grandkids. It is about what country do we want them to have? Because I look at what they've been through. I mean, look at the younger generation. They went through COVID. It was traumatic for them. You look at the fact that they see $34 trillion in debt. They wonder what that means for them. They don't know if they're going to be able to get a job. They don't think they'll ever be able to afford a home. They don't know how they're going to make ends meet. And they worry about wars around the world. And you look at all of that, and what kind of country are they in? One that has a tent of anger and division and hatred. Our kids deserve better. They deserve to know what normal feels like. And we wonder why there's so much anxiety, stress, and depression. It's because what has our country become? We're better than this. We can do better than this, but they deserve better than this.
Yeah, and that is a leadership issue. It's really about setting that tone and tenor for the country. You had a unique experience and a unique perch at the UN to see all kinds of leaders. You've been very outspoken in terms of leaders that are thugs, bad guys, and dictators, and how transparent they are. What are the lessons we should be learning from those kind of leaders, and how we approach that here in the United States?
Well, I think, first of all, we should know that we live in the best country in the world. But America's not going to be the best country in the world if we don't fight for her. You know, my husband, 8 months ago, left for another year-long deployment. And I watched him and 230 soldiers pick up their 2 duffel bags of belongings to go to a country they'd never been, all in the name of protecting America. They're willing to sacrifice their lives and their families because they still believe in this amazing experiment that is America. So if they're willing to sacrifice for us there, we need to be willing to fight for America here because we have a country to save. And what I saw at the United Nations is so many countries, even though they would try and stab us in the back corners, they would always say they loved the fact that we had freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to do and be anything we wanted to be without government getting in the way. But we now have to look and say, what are they saying about us now? Because the world is looking at us. And they see us as totally distracted. And when America's distracted, the world is less safe. And we're seeing that play out in the wars all around the world. We've got to start focusing. And we've got to start really saying, what are we going to do to fix national security? What are we going to make sure we do to not go off this fiscal cliff? What are we going to do to get our kids reading again? What are we going to do to secure our border? What are we going to do to bring law and order back to our country? And all of those things are what's at play in this caucus. Yeah. Because you look, this is a shift in the Republican Party. This is a shift in the fact that we used to be for fiscal responsibility. We used to be for smaller government. But what we saw under Donald Trump was he spent $8 trillion, he got us $8 trillion in debt in just 4 years, more than any other president. He didn't shrink government, he grew government. Yeah. He didn't talk about spending, but what are Republicans doing on top of that? Now they opened up pet projects and earmarks for the first time in 10 years. Passing through 7,000 of them last year. That's a shift in the Republican Party. Yeah. But you also look at the shift in the fact that we used to believe our national security was about peace through strength. And now you see that it started to become more isolationist.
Yeah.
America can never be so arrogant to think we don't need friends.
Yeah.
After 9/11, we needed a lot of friends. This is a time where we need to decide, do we want more of the same?
Yeah.
Which is what we're getting with Donald Trump and Joe Biden, or do we want to go in a new direction?
Yeah.
I think it's time we go in a new direction.
Yeah, I think that leadership conversation is so fascinating. In my time in Washington, I always said the most frustrated people in D.C. were former governors and former business executives, and you've done both. I always referred to them as the flat forehead society. They'd run around saying nothing functions this way.
That's exactly right.
You've been willing to not just shout the pejoratives and the talking points at your enemies, you've also been willing to speak truth to your friends on the Republican side. Talk to me how you lead, as a leader, the conversations around things like $34 trillion in debt. You don't get there through conflict. That's collusion on both sides of the aisle. Things like immigration. How do you lead a different kind of conversation on those issues?
Well, I think, first of all, we have to understand that we can't have a Republican Party that's about one man. And that is what it has become. And you look at the fact that, you know, I told you about the debt. Donald Trump's still not talking about fiscal responsibility. But you also look at what's happened just in the past few months. I've been in this race a year. After New Hampshire, when they said I would be down by 35 points, we got 43%. But Donald Trump gets on stage and he has a temper tantrum, talks about revenge. And then the next day he says anyone that supports her is barred permanently from MAGA. If you're running for president, you have to be humble enough to know this is about addition. You're bringing people into your fold. Then he goes and pushes the RNC to name him the presumptive nominee. We don't anoint kings in America. And then he's got these court cases and he's talking about being a victim. What bothers me in all of that is at no point does he ever talk about the American people. At no point does he talk about the fact that we're $34 trillion in debt. At no point does he talk about that only 31% of eighth graders in our country are proficient in reading. At no point does he talk about these open borders that is completely lawless. At no point is he talking about the crime in the cities. At no point is he talking about the wars around the world. He's just talking about himself. And this is about the American people. But how's it playing out in states around the country? I was in Michigan. Michigan was a beacon of light back in 2012. They were winning races up and down the ticket. They had passed right to work. But now you look, since Donald Trump's been president, Michigan lost the governor's mansion, they lost the state house, they lost the state senate. I went to Minnesota, the exact same thing. I went to Colorado, no Republican has gotten above 45% statewide since Donald Trump became president. Everything that we're doing under Donald Trump is leading us further away from what we want America to be and further losses. And if we continue in this direction, we're just falling to the socialist left. And we can't do that.
Fantastic. We're going to stay with that conversation. As Einstein said, it's not that he was any smarter. He was just willing to stay with the question just a little bit longer. So we're going to stay with the question about the future of the country and the leadership principles we all should be considering as we choose candidates in the 2024 election cycle. More with former ambassador and presidential hopeful Nikki Haley when Sunday Edition continues on KSL 5 TV. Welcome back to Sunday Edition. We're continuing our conversation with former South Carolina governor and United States ambassador to the UN and Republican candidate for president, Nikki Haley. And Ambassador Haley, you've been doing this for a little over a year now, this presidential run. And what has surprised you the most as you've traveled the country?
You know, I love being out with people because that's really when you listen to normal people, you hear what they care about. And, you know, I think that there is a huge group of people that want us to get back to faith and family and freedom and country. That's what it's all about. And you can see that. But I also really, it's kind of renewed my will to want to focus on the next generation. You know, I have all of these friendship bracelets that little girls from all over the country have given me. And I've got a bag of them because they look up and they want to see someone that they can be like. They look up and they want to see what could happen. And we still have to remember that our leaders need to be people that our kids want to grow up to be.
Yeah.
because they watch everything. They're paying attention to everything. And so I've loved probably the kids more than anything, but I love the parents who come because their kids want them to bring them. Or the fact that they, you know, people are scared and Americans are tired. That's the biggest thing. You can feel the fatigue that Americans have because they feel this weight of anger. They feel this weight of division. They know that it's out of control and they just want normal again.
What have the American people taught you? It's such a learning thing to travel the country and to listen to those voters. And I think great leaders are great learners. So what have the American people taught you over the course of this campaign?
Well, first I want to go back to what I learned when I was at the UN, because I think every American should see that. I didn't go to the pretty places. That was the other cabinet members. I typically went to places that people don't go to and that you wouldn't want to go to. I was in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where they use rape as a weapon of war. I was in South Sudan, where I sat with crying mothers whose babies had been taken from them, from their arms, and thrown into fires right in front of them. I was on the Simon Bolivar Bridge, and I watched thousands of Venezuelans walk for hours in the hot sun holding their babies to get the one meal they might get that day in Colombia. They were killing zoo animals for food. I had to look at images of children who died from chemical weapons from Assad in Syria. When you see that, it gives you such a perspective of how blessed we are, but it also gives you a perspective of how fragile we are as a country. And we have to remember that. My husband, who deployed to Afghanistan, he would always say, I wish every American could spend one day in Afghanistan, because they would see that our homeless live in luxury compared to that. So I take that perspective, and I go and I see what the American people are saying, and I think they feel the fragility. I think that they feel the fact that, no, they don't understand the Democratic Republic of Congo or South Sudan, but they do see our country slipping away. And that's the part, when you listen to them, they don't talk about political talking points, and they don't talk about parties, so to speak. They talk about their kids. They talk about the debt. They talk about the fact that groceries are so expensive. They talk about the fact that they don't think their kids are going to be able to buy a home. They talk about student debt. There's so many things that they are feeling every day in their homes that is not even being talked about in Washington, D.C. And I think that's the part that more politicians need to be out among the people. Because when you hear what they have to say, those are the things that matter.
We always say that community and culture lead. Politics has to be downstream from all of that.
That's right.
What's the one thing you wish we were talking more about or talking differently about in this country?
I wish that everyone would realize that we are looking at a ship that's got a hole in it with Donald Trump. And we can ignore that hole all we want, and we'll go down with the ship. Or we can say we can do something new and take that life raft. You look at everything Donald Trump has done, turns into chaos. No, I voted for Donald Trump twice. I was proud to serve America in his administration. This is not personal. This is about the fact that we need to go in a new direction. It is not normal under Joe Biden to sit there and have millions of illegal immigrants come across the border and no one stopped them. It is not normal under Joe Biden to focus more on gender pronouns than you do whether kids can read them. It is not normal under Joe Biden to have wars around the world. But it's not normal under Donald Trump to choose the side of Putin over our allies. It's not normal for Donald Trump to spend $60 million in campaign contributions on his personal court cases. It's not normal for Donald Trump to criticize the supporters of an opponent. And it's not normal for Joe Biden to call his opponents fascists and for Donald Trump to call his opponents vermin. None of this is normal. But can't we imagine a country where we could actually sit at the dinner table and not have a political fight? I mean, shouldn't we imagine a country where we can go and say what we need to at work and not worry about being demoted? Don't we want a country where we can strongly disagree but not hate each other over it? That's what this is about. That's what my fight is about, is that we can do this. I know we can, but I know how fragile our country can be, but I know how strong our people are. And so if they remember, don't complain about what happens in a general election if you don't participate in this caucus.
Got to show up. That is the name of the game. And part of that community and part of that focus, part of what you did as governor, the beast of the Southeast that South Carolina was then, Utah has become not just a crossroads of the West, but a crossroads to the world with so many international connections. As we round things out, Ambassador, this is a question I've asked to every candidate at every level, from those running for President of the United States to local school board and everyone in between. I think it's the most important question, and that is campaigns are hard. They're exhausting, they're exasperating. You've been doing this for a year, plus your other campaigns you've been part of. What is it that will make all of this worthwhile, even if you don't get the result you want in the end?
If people will finally realize that this is not about politics for me, if they will realize that this is actually out of love of country, this is actually wanting a better life for my kids and everybody else's kids. This is about me putting on the warning signs to say, don't ignore what's happening right in front of us. We are better than this. We can do better than this. But we have to agree that we have to be part of the solution. I'm willing to take the cuts. I'm willing to take the bruises. I'm willing to take the pain and the name calling. Because I think good things come when you go through the pain. But I also think that you have to go through the pain to appreciate the blessing. And I'm hoping everybody will see through this and we can all appreciate the blessing.
Ambassador Nikki Haley, thanks so much for joining us today. We
you.
encourage everyone to participate in the caucus night, Tuesday, March 5th. When it comes to our constitutional republic, every voice matters, every vote makes a difference. We the people must be the people if we want to pass freedom on to the next generation. Stay with us, more Sunday Edition coming up next.